Hi, I'm Tory Bruno. I've been a rocket scientist for 40 years, and I got to tell you that every single day has been an adventure. I have gotten the opportunity to do just amazing things. I have slept on a torpedo. I have shot a bullet out of the sky with another bullet. I have stood in the middle of Armageddon with all of its terrifying and awesome power. But I have also sent a spacecraft into orbit around the sun, the fastest human object in the universe, flying directly through the literal atmosphere of the sun. There is no career like a career spent in service to this great nation, service to the awesome cause of exploration, and service to the great calling of human dignity around this planet. And now, on the burn sequence, I'm going to pull that curtain back a little bit and let you look inside. So welcome to our show, and welcome to the burn sequence. We're going to talk today about NASA, and I have just the perfect guest, one of the most interesting persons who led science through one of the most challenging times and important times in NASA's history, really, for important science missions. But, for context, I got to tell you, you've heard me say this before, NASA is just a tremendous jewel, not just for our country, but for the whole world. It does things that no other organization can do, and there's exactly three reasons why that is true. The first is it represents just a tremendous technical depth and breadth across its organization. That is the building up of 60 years of capability, and you just can't replicate that. And I think it's also important to remember that that's fragile because that is a continuous chain of people. It's not just the facilities. So you got to take care of that. The second thing is the tremendous network that NASA has built up over time with researchers and research institutes and industrial partners that can, turn some of these big visions into physical hardware. And then the last thing I would touch on is that NASA gets to do science because science is interesting. And the work that they do is done because the science itself is important, not because it's going to make somebody wealthy. All right. So, don't get me wrong. When when NASA launched the James Webb Space Telescope, there were industrial partners building spacecraft and launching rockets. You get paid for that. You can earn a good living. It's a great and cool mission to be a part of. But once it goes up, that's kind of it. It's up there doing science. It's not going to make some CEO founder into a billionaire. Instead, it's going to enrich all of us, every single person, by helping us better understand cosmology and our place in the universe. And no other organization can do that. You can't go to a board of directors with a business case that says, I'm going to resolve the Hubble tension and get investment. Only NASA can do that. And our guest today, Thomas Zurbuchen, he led the science directorate at NASA through a really important period of time. And he is really just a really interesting guy. He's a great leader. He's a good program manager. I would say Thomas was a little unusual in his background coming into a role like that because he came from being an entrepreneur and also is, a no-kidding scientist, real researcher. And he kind of brings that all together, but also just a really great guy and a person who understands that big picture. And I'm going to tell, Thomas is on with me now, and I'm going to tell a Thomas story. So forgive me, Thomas. But, we were doing a launch for you. And honestly, I don't remember which one it was because that's not the thing that stands out in my mind. But, I go down to the Cape and I want to go out and I want to visit the rocket on the pad because I like to do that. Don't tell anybody, but sometimes I'll give the rocket a hug or a little pat. It's just a little superstition. And so when you do that, you leave the control center, the ASOC we call it, you head north on this big long straight road, you drive past the vertical integration facility where we stack the rocket and put the spacecraft on top. And at the end of that is the launch pad, and there's an Atlas sitting there. And once it's there, the big gate is closed. So when you get there, you got to turn right and you got to sweep around this big circular arc to the back where the guard shack is, and you get in. And while you're doing that, you're in Florida, which means between the road and this giant, like 12, 15 foot high fence is jungle, impenetrable. There's snakes, there's alligators. If you're going to walk this, you're going to walk on the road. You're not walking over there. And we're swinging around, and I happen to catch something out of my eye. There's this sort of overgrown deer path, and I thought I saw something down the deer path. And I yell at my driver, I go, stop, stop, back up, back up. And we back up, and I look, and there's Thomas. He's in there in the jungle with the snakes and the alligators. And I go, roll down my eye, I go, what are you doing, Thomas? He says, I'm shooting a video to put on social media to help everybody understand how cool and exciting this mission is. And I'm like, Thomas, get in the car. I could get you through the gate. We'll get you a better view. But the reason I tell you this story is because Thomas was a very important person at NASA. His office could have just called my staff and said, Dr. Zurbuchen would like to make a video at the launch pad. We'd have rolled out the red carpet. We'd have had him in there. There'd have been badges. There'd have been a film crew. But that's not Thomas's style. He's a very humble guy. He was just out there with an iPhone, shooting a selfie, doing his thing, because he knew that these missions are for everyone. They're not just for our elite scientific community. They're for everyone. And he was reaching out to that broad community where he is very loved and very respected, and just making it real. And it was kind of the coolest thing. Do you remember that, Thomas?
Yes, I remember. I think he was like you should have asked me. But, I just really, just like you said, what we often, focused on these missions, what we never want to forget, you never forget, I know that, is the many people that help support those. And we want to tell them what we're doing with that money and kind of inspire them and their children, like learners of all ages, just about the excitement of what we're doing in space.
Absolutely. And even more importantly, Thomas was not eaten by an alligator, so he can be here with us on the burn sequence today. All right. So maybe some specific data. Thomas was the Associate Administrator for Science. I think you started in 2016 and you took us all the way to 22. So not just one of the most ambitious periods in NASA science, but also through the challenges of COVID, which was really, really something. And for our listeners, just a handful of the missions to ground it for them. Perseverance, where we went to Mars with lander and helicopter, and we'll understand Mars better, and maybe, just maybe, we'll find evidence of ancient life there, which will change everything. OSIRIS-REx, where we went out to, a body and banged into it and took a sample. That was super cool. Parker Solar Probe, right now, flying through the atmosphere of the sun. And, of course, the James Webb Space Telescope. I've worn my James Webb pin just for you, Thomas.
That's amazing. Thanks. Yeah.
So these are really, really important missions, and you took us through all of that. And I would say, I said a minute ago that you were a different science leader and not taking anything away from the others, but I felt what you really brought was a perspective about taking smart risks, being innovative, inspiring people, but at the same time having that balance to know that in some of these missions we can do more of that with, and others are these big, billion-dollar marquee things that you have to treat appropriately. So it's a real balance, and it takes a lot of judgment to that. And so, welcome and thank you for being on the show with us. But I got to start at the beginning. So you're from a small town in Switzerland. I think someone told me, maybe you told me one time, that you were the first person in your family to go to college. Mm-hmm. And from that, we went on to what we just talked about. You flew 37 missions. You started 54. I got to ask you, what inspired the young Thomas Zurbuchen to, I think, maybe defy your parents a little bit and, hit on out of, Heiligenschwendi, which is a canton in the Schweiz. What inspired you to take this amazing journey?
So, I want to say how excited I am to be here with you. Kind of one of the joys of having the job that I had for this long time is to make new friends that otherwise I would never know. And you're one of them. I just have enjoyed the time. I remember we had the first meetings. I remember your staff was really upset with us because we had an hour planned. 4 hours later, we're still there.
I
Just
remember that.
and I still hear about it at times. But I mean that was a normal occurrence, and then it's not because we were. I mean, I really was learning through those discussions about how you're thinking about this crucial act, which separates technology from space technology, which is launch, which is, like such a hard thing. And like many people think of it as routine, they're only the people who don't understand what actually is there. So I learned a lot of this. And so I just really appreciate it. We all have our stories. Mine starts in a small cow village, which is far away from any industry. Literally, my neighbors were farmers and supporting people of farmers. There was a butcher, a carpenter. My father was an evangelist, so he was in a religious congregation, and clearly in his mind I failed because I was supposed to take over the church, which is what I didn't do. But what I had in my favor were two things. The first one is very dark skies, and by the way, an environment that appreciated nature. But the second one is public schools that actually enabled me to learn. And so basically I went with these humble beginnings, walking up and down the road to the class, the three grades, two grades at the beginning, then four were in the same classroom. So I managed to kind of get through that curiosity that was in the neighborhood. Like my grandma understood weather better than many meteorologists I knew, right? Kind of because she observed nature. Yeah. My father appreciated it for many different ways. But then the public school that gave me the tools, the math, the science, the history. And pretty soon I started reading stories of explorers, and both scientists, but also explorers like Magellan, like Columbus, like, also things that didn't go so well. That I learned, Shackleton, I learned about these things, and I got excited and realized to do these kind of work, you need to go to college, which is why this idea came up. And I just want to say it here, kind of at the beginning, many people were actually actively discouraging that because, prejudgments happen in many people's lives, like, oh, from that village, these farmers, they're not very smart. That's what they said about my village. And the good news is with just hard work and dedication, you can overcome those judgments. And at the end, the doors open and to the kind of work that we did together, Tory.
What a great story. I feel a kindred with you in that regard. I grew up on a small ranch, same kind of thing, rural community, cattle. I always say great place to grow up, but no work for a rocket scientist.
I used the very same joke for astrophysicists. And I want to say something like that sometimes it's these kind of hard, there's many of our colleagues that not make it out of these, and they have, by the way, happy lives and doing great things. But the one thing that I really learned over time is some of the best advantages I had came from that environment. One of the things, my father, if I disrespected anyone, including the guy who cleaned the road, including anybody, he would go after me. And that respect for the people who do the hard work so often, focus on, tightening those screws, many people that are in positions that you and I are, have not learned that. And I learned that early on, and God, did it ever help me, just to kind of understand, hey, my job is to make those people's life a success, because at the end, the mission is successful if they're understanding what success means and they have all the tools. And that's something I learned in Heiligenschwendi, like you correctly said, a community of 500 people.
Yep. Well, it's a responsibility, isn't it? Yeah. And just all work has dignity. I believe that too. So I see it the way you do. So when you look back on all of that, Thomas, what would you be able to single out what you think your proudest achievements are?
In many ways, I think of the proudest achievements as as things that either are massive learning experiences for me or things that have huge impact. And the first time I built an instrument, and you're going to have to help me because it's long before we were friends. Did you guys launch the WIND spacecraft that's currently at L1? I'm pretty sure you did.
I think
A
we did,
Delta
yes.
2, a
Yeah.
Delta 2, right?
Delta 2, right.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
Delta 2.
So I as a master student built that piece, and I'm going to tell you, I'm so proud of it because it's the only piece of hardware I did end to end, including the assembly. I got trained as a technician, and I want to just tell you, it's kind of to make the point we just made. Like, we were really massively behind. This was my master's thesis, and the professor said, we won't give that to you. It's impossible to do. And the reason was that the company that actually needed to do an important step in this, a manufacturing step, basically said, we don't have time. And I basically, they had tried everything, and he said, I don't have time. So I said, can you give me a chance to try? And I called him up and I said, look, you're your company is really important, and I just really appreciate it. And I just wanted to tell you why I care about this hardware, which is a small mass spec that looks at the sun. And I explained it to him, and he interrupted me and said, look, here's what happens when the university asks me, I move business away, then they're late, and I lose money for my employees. And I basically said, look, here's the deal I'll make you. I personally will be responsible to getting this on time to you, and I will hand carry it to make sure that you get it on time. And what was not possible in 6 months, we had in 3 weeks, and basically
Wow.
done, because he put it ahead of the line. And then what he did in addition to that, Tory, he called up my professor and said, hey, you have a good one here. Take care of him, because he's actually trying. So for me, that was always kind of the first time I thought I could do this. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Of course, the other one probably has to be the James Webb Space Telescope, just because it's the biggest stretch. But it's a close group. The Parker Solar Probe goes in there, as does Perseverance. James Webb is just so hard, and we almost lost the ball. Like, when I came in within a year, we almost lost the ball, and we had such a cultural set of challenges. We really, really struggled, and I was, of course, had the fortunate opportunity to be part of the team that turned it around and then got it to launch, and see what happens now. Almost every week you see some amazing new images. So the first one was the most important for me, because it showed me that kind of my things that I thought were weaknesses, my little rural upbringing, were the strength that helped me solve problems.
Yes.
But the other one was important because it changes the way we think of the universe that we're part of, as you know.
I remember that was tough. Northrop Grumman built that spacecraft, and it wasn't one of our missions, but I watched you managing that, and it was so hard, and I thought you just navigated that really expertly.
And you helped me with some things, right? We had some questions about launch systems and issues, and I still have you on my speed dial. I'm not calling you as often, but often on the way home, it's like, Tory, look, I mean, can you, like, what am I missing here? What are the questions I should be asking that I'm not asking? And you've always been so generous with that. I always said, if the whole community acted like you, like, we'd all be better. And by the way, I say that whether you're in the room or not.
Well,
Just so
thank
you
you.
know.
I'm flattered. Well, my favorite mission, I always tell people, is Parker, mainly because you and I were there with Dr. Parker, and it was the coolest thing. But I also have a special place in my heart for Lucy, the mission out to the Jovian Trojans, and because of you. And I don't know if you remember this, but I'll tell the story for our listeners. That mission happened during COVID, and my daughter was having a baby at the time. She was pregnant, and so I'm working. I think I was working from home. I don't remember if we were on lockdown or not, or if I was there for some other reason. And I get a phone call from my daughter, and she says, "Dad, we're on our way to the hospital. I'm having the baby." And I'm like, "Wow, okay. You guys have been arguing about a name. So have you settled on a name?" And she says, "No, we're arguing right now in the car." And I said, "Well, honey, you're running out of time." And she said, I know, I know, I know. And you couldn't go to hospital, so I just kept working. So we hung up, and my very next phone call was with you. And you asked me, hey, how's your daughter doing? And I said, well, she's going to the hospital right now. And you knew about the name thing. So you asked me, have they picked a name? And I said, no. And you said, well, Tory, it's obvious. The universe has spoken. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, well, your daughter worked on the Lucy spacecraft. You're launching Lucy for me next week. I think we were just a few days off. And they don't have a name yet. And she's having the baby like right now, right before the launch. So clearly she should be called Lucy. And I go, you're absolutely right. So we had our meeting, we finished, and as soon as I hung up with you, I called her back. And I said, honey, how you doing? She says, Dad, I'm in the delivery room. What do you want? And I said, well, have you picked a name yet? And she said, no, we still haven't decided. And I said, well, Brianna, I have consulted with NASA, and we have determined that the name of your baby is Lucy. And she said, no, Dad, and hung up on me.
I know. What's the baby called? I forgot. It's not Lucy. Yeah.
So her name is Fiona, but now that she's like 3.5, almost 4, she's almost old enough for me to help her understand her secret name, which is clearly Lucy.
Yeah. I know about this grandchild of yours, and I'll never forget because we had this discussion, and it probably shows, right, kind of how often we talked and how deeply engaged we were in so many things. Yeah, Lucy is just a wonderful mission, of course. Much of the mission is still ahead, and
Right.
and of course the launch was fabulous.
Oh, thank you. Well, I guess we've gone past Donald Johanson, the
Yep.
second body in the main asteroid belt, and we're on our way out to the Trojan camp, or the Greek camp, I guess, is first.
Yeah,
Yep, outstanding.
yeah, exactly.
So you had to make a lot of tough calls when you were in that job. How did you approach that and get the balance right?
Look, I don't know. I think that what I try to do always, and we already talked about this, frankly, Tori, you and I believe the same. I looked at it from the point of view of taxpayers. Remember, ultimately, I think we work for the government officials that are elected by taxpayers. So kind of the hardest jobs, kind of nobody in the job that I was in, the head of science, wants to be known for canceling missions. But that's precisely what we have to do sometimes. And the way I thought about this is, and frankly, I used it in a regular fashion. I put an empty chair next to me. So often in these decisions, like imagine the average taxpayer sits here. Can we explain what we're doing? And if the answer is no, we cannot explain what we're doing, frankly, let's not do it. And so the missions that I canceled, the hardest missions, were missions where, frankly, they're along the following lines. Suppose you fix a sink in your bathroom and, you ask for somebody for a bid, they say it's $100. After they come back and said, how is it going? It's like, well, we already spent 150, but it's another 100.
Oh.
It's like, I mean, like you would never leave that bit, stick with that person, say, thank you so much, I'll find another person, except if there's a really, really good reason. Like, wow, like there's a tube behind it. We did not see that, but without that good reason, there's not that. So I did precisely that, but with millions. Not dollars, but millions,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I canceled a specific mission with these numbers. Exactly. And so for me, those are the hardest decisions. I think the second hardest decisions are equally hard. And frankly, if you ask where did I get most sleepless nights, it's those type of decisions. They have to do with people. So often what happens if you're in charge, right? There's certain problems only you can solve. If you have a team that is working on a mission, you have a leader that cannot be successful, the only person often that can help that team is you by moving that leader to the side or creating some support system for them. And we should never give up on people before we try to make them truly successful. It's not some kind of, I walk in the door and scream at somebody. It's just not my style, right? We try everything, but there are times where, again, kind of the empathy has to be with the team more than a leader that cannot cut it But for me, those are equally hard decisions. So in both cases, what I really tried to do is stand back from it and basically said, what is the relevant stakeholder, right? It's either the taxpayers or in a second way, it's the team that needs to be successful. And the question is, what's the job that is mine to actually support the team towards these stakeholders, even if the answer is sometimes we need to say no.
Yeah. Well, that's so insightful, because I think a lot of people, when they look into our world, they really see the technology and the missions, which is the outcome, but it's really all about people, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
People make it happen.
Exactly right. So I made this tally, Tory, and basically kind of said, how many problems did I have? And I made this running tally and basically said, how many of these problems are actual tech problems? And how many of them are people problems? And at the beginning, I would have guessed that the answer is 70-30 or 80-20. 80%, 70% tech and 20% people. It's the reverse story. It's like, it's 20-80, it's 70-30. I don't know where it is exactly and how you do it, but because some of them are there in the middle, right? The team cannot solve the tech problem because it's not empowered to do so. It's not, but that's basically where it is. So yes, it's at the center of a big launch, like the ones you celebrate, of a big mission, is a team, right? And a team that needs to work and trust each other in ways that's almost irrational at the beginning. Because like every one of these team members, like you and I certainly know about me, has mistakes, has weaknesses.
Sure.
And at the end, you need to kind of build this perfect team that makes a launch super reliable. You can't screw up, right? And so how do you do that? That's the magic of a trusting team.
Absolutely. And, a team of people that's got, clarity on what they're trying to get done, and they're supported by their leader, and they're really motivated, can just do impossible things.
Oh, yeah.
And that environment that allows them to succeed, that's on us, right? That's on the leader.
Yeah.
So,
and I totally agree. That culture, that kind of culture coming down, yes, you can do that. That radiates from the leader. So many people think of culture as a bottom-up thing. I don't. I think it's what we set kind of at the top, and kind of our behaviors that are there and kind of are repeatable. So kind of people can trust what we're going to do, and are basically know that we have the best in mind. I want to tell you some of there's a number of people, especially if you have a big wallet, once this wallet disappears, only the right friends stick around. The others move on to the next person who has a big wallet. But I remember some of my favorite probably kind of feedback points I got often are of partners of leaders who in one case walked up to me and said, I just want you to know my partner, is manager of this mission, and you should just know they absolutely and totally loved working with you because they knew you always had their back no matter what. And basically said that is not happening in their career often. And so for me, that's what it means, right? Exactly, that kind of empowerment.
I agree. Absolutely. Well, so where would you imagine the next big exciting frontiers are going to come in NASA and in science and exploration, as you have your perspective and kind of look into the future?
So look, I think there are kind of two questions that boggle my mind. The first one is there life somewhere else? And I just really have to believe that the question is either, if life is really abundant, the question is right here in the solar system. And we need to create a whole new generation of missions that are not just about habitability, they're about finding life. And, some of these things that relate to Mars, some of them relate to Enceladus, to Europa, perhaps going through the ice. Some of them relate to looking at planets and their atmospheres, the Habitable Worlds Observatory being one of the missions that really says, hey, look, if there's life on a planet somewhere, the atmosphere changes just like it did on Earth. So for me, that's the one thing that boggles my mind. The other one is about just reaching into the solar system. And some of my favorite missions are the Voyager missions. They're the missions of my lifetime. They were launched when I was a kid, and I keep watching what they're doing. Tory, I feel bad that in my generation I've not managed to create the next generation missions that's 10 times as far as Voyager. And I think that relates to nuclear propulsion. It relates to new different propulsion technologies. And we need to do that. Because see, if we do the next factor of 10, there's only a factor of 50 left, and we're at the next stars. Like, so for me, that, like, my children need to do that. Our children, our Fiona, all these, they need to do that. They need to do that, right? And so for me, but we need to do our factor of 10. So those are the two things I'm focused on.
I couldn't agree more. That is so exciting. And I think, when, I'll say it this way, when we find life elsewhere, it will just be one of the most important moments in human history. And we're not going to find it if we're not looking.
Oh, yeah. And we need to also, I think we need to use the technologies we have, right? There may be, that topic can be really addressed with some humans that stand there too. So for me, I've never seen a contradiction between human exploration and the exploration that I mostly did with robots. It's just, I'm sending robots where humans cannot go yet. And,
yes.
Or should never go, like near the sun. I don't really wish somebody that we send them there, right?
Well, we all know someone we would send there.
Probably every person has a slightly different wishful name that they would put there, yeah.
Well, it's kind of a funny debate. I'll get asked when I'm out in public, robots or humans for exploration? And the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. We need both. I mean, robots can, as you say, go places that people can't or shouldn't. A very predictable task can be performed by automation better than a person can, but human beings are flexible and can deal with the unpredictable task. And besides, is it really exploration if we don't eventually touch it the way I like to touch my rockets before they go off?
Exactly right. No, I really believe, and by the way, also together, right? I just really believe, just like in a battlefield today, in wars, right? Humans and robots will work together. I mean, look at what's happening at some of the fronts right now, how technologies are saving lives and pushing back aggressors, right? And so for me, like that support by robots together with humans is a totally different way of thinking about exploration that frankly not enough people are thinking about, my opinion.
I agree. Space is a very difficult place for a person to be, and machines, robotics are going to help people be more effective when they're there. Mm-hmm. Although I got to tell you, you mentioned Fiona. I'm a little bit worried because, she's like 3. I ordered a copy of Sutton's Propulsion Elements, and I sent it to my daughter's house for Fiona to begin her journey. It's got a great chapter on, nuclear thermal. And my daughter has a degree in electrical engineering. She sent me back a photo of Fiona sitting on the propulsion book while reading a digital signal processing textbook. So I'm just being a little critical as a grandparent here. Propulsion, Fiona, propulsion.
Propulsion is pretty important, especially for the topic I talked about, right? Really transcending the boundaries we've already explored. I think the propulsion is the necessary part. New energy out there is the necessary part.
Yeah. Well, Thomas, today you're back in academia in Zurich. So how's that going, and why was now the right time to sort of go back to school?
So look, I have been thinking a lot about what to do after I left NASA, and frankly, I didn't really know what to do. And I got a number of offers, and I'll be very frank, I took the offer that made me least comfortable. I had never worked in Switzerland. 2 weeks after my PhD, I left. The one thing I left out in my story, I was kicked out of my family early on. It's just because we're different people. It's not because anybody was good or bad. We're just different people and different worldviews. And so going to Switzerland was not something I was necessarily at a goal, but my wife said, look, I mean, we've never tried that. And so what I did is I took a part-time position here. And frankly, because I saw the people around, there's a lot of, there are these students that I met. I got an honorary doctorate here, and I met these students and just like, we want to get into space. There's 0 educational programs that actually got them there. You know, like the people like me smuggled their way in through astrophysics or get off through other places in the US. And I'm like, let's build a program, the first educational program for space here. So I did that the first year. When I was here, we're now starting the second year. But you know, I'm really proud of the team. We did it 3 times faster than anybody ever did it. And then, so then the next thing we did is we focused on just kind of getting projects started. So you need to get a few system engineers and managers, you know, that to kind of get going with space projects. So we built that group. And frankly, what we just did is we're making one big bet, and that's kind of an Earth Science Application Center. You know, kind of, it's actually almost the opposite of the first thing you might guess when you think about it. Like, so the point is, there's a lot of data out there, something like 200 petabytes of Earth science data. Kind of, if we analyze those data, roughly 90 to 95% are never looked at.
Oh my!
And of course that is because we're the way we analyze the data are not scaling well. You have grad students look at these things. There's only so much that the grad students can do. But what you have is increasing capability in space and increasing capability in artificial intelligence. All of a sudden, you can do things that really help people. So, you know, like consider Earthlights in the mountains here.
Sure.
Like, so how do we survey all the mountains so we know every rock that moves more than 5 centimeters per year down the hill, and we see it may be threatening the tourists or the farmers underneath that rock, or we can help farmers. Basically, we can look from space and basically tell you which trees or which grapes are in good shape, which ones are not. So we want the farmer to save money, to actually, you know, not use, you know, fertilizer that they're not needing, because that fertilizer just goes into the water. And when we're swimming in the water, there's too much algae there and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So really what I ultimately think, you know, like we want to use the space data to really help decision making and create opportunities on Earth. And that's what this center is all about. I raised it from a private foundation, 100 million. The university puts an extra 50 on top of it in one shot to really do that. So I'm excited because, like, I think the smallness of Switzerland in this case can be like what I want to do is Switzerland really use as a calibration part for Earth science data that everybody can use, including commercial companies, and then scale these solutions worldwide. Because again, we want to support humans from space. So those are the kind of ideas that I'm working on with 50% of my time. The other 50, of course, I'm trying to help companies and be of value in some way.
What a great vision. And boy, Thomas, that is just so classically you, that entrepreneurship. You just created that thing out of nothing. And, you know, I really like the way you're thinking about AI in that context, because it is just so powerful at handling massive quantities of data. That's its real strength. You know, I'd say, you know, a lot of people get a little distracted because of the large language models. You know, you can talk to them. And I'll say it this way, people are sort of pre-programmed to imagine if you can converse with something, there's intelligence behind it. And so we run off and we focus on, you know, concepts like, you know, artificial general intelligence. But really what we have is a tremendously powerful tool that could handle more data, you know, in a minute than human beings could handle in years. So what a great application.
Yeah, and I just really believe we're just opening that door, right? And kind of, and what I really want us to do is put some of the smartest minds on that, because, like, look, if it comes to kind of how we deal with changes on Earth, I always believe innovation is the bigger change agent than any other thing. Like, so, some people want to regulate everything. It's like, I'm sure there's regulation that are needed for the market to evolve.
Sure.
But innovation is what really, I mean, that's why your rockets are competitive out there and doing these amazing things that they're doing, right? I mean, that's true for solutions here on Earth. That's true for astrobiology or other things we've talked about here.
Yep, I agree. All right, we're getting a high sign, so it's time for the lightning round. Did they warn you about that?
Go for it. Go for it.
All right, so this is like an A or B thing. I'm just going to fire them at you. You got to pick one. You can elaborate if you want to. You don't have to. So we always start with the easy one, Kirk or Spock?
Spock.
Of course, of course.
That's me. Exactly right.
Absolutely. All right, here's a trickier one, though. So Eugene Parker or Fritz Zwicky, the discoverer of the neutron star?
That's a really hard one. I mean, Zwicky, of course, Swiss guy, went to Caltech, did all this amazing work, right? I mean, he actually was one of the first guys to talk about dark matter before it was called that. It's just incredible the work he did. Eugene Parker is, for me, the person I would take here because of an equal body of amazing work. Frankly, I think in any way as comparable to Zwicky. Both were overlooked by the science community, but not for the same reason. In the case of Parker, he's like me and so many people I like, more a Midwestern person who's kind of understated. Zwicky at times was kind of in your face a little, and there's famous discussions, but Parker is just a genuinely kind human being who deserved everything he got and then some.
I think so too. And he's the reason why Parker Solar Probe is my favorite mission, because we stood up on a roof with him and we launched that giant Delta IV Heavy, culmination of his life's work. As you say, a rebel. People did not accept his ideas about solar wind at first. And he was like 90 years old, if I remember right, at the time we launched. And there was just, I could see a little tear in the corner of his eye. You can't.
For me, do you mind if I just quickly tell you how it got named that way? So I came to NASA, and this mission was called Solar Probe Plus. And the question is, why was it called Solar Probe Plus? It was because there was a committee, and I was part of that committee, that was proposing this solar probe as opposed to a different solar probe that the scientists had thought about before they talked to the engineers, which was zipping by Jupiter, going over the poles of the sun, one pass, and then another 6 years later, another path, and that's it. But it got a little bit closer to the sun than this one did. And so we called it Solar Probe Plus as a sales gimmicky thing. And I'm like, that should never have stuck. And so I came in and I said, look, that mission should be named. And I basically went to the National Academy members and said, how should we name it? They all came back and said, unanimously, Parker Solar Probe. And this is what's good when you're not an insider. I did not know that nobody had ever done that. And so I basically named it after him, after due diligence, right? We wanted to make sure that that was, and we did that. And frankly, Parker was so excited. So it's the only time I ever got yelled at by my boss really loud. And here's the story, right? We named it, and my PR team said, hey, this is going to be a really small story. Nobody's interested in this name. Nikki Fox, who was the project scientist of Parker Solar Probe, came up with the tagline with her team, a mission to touch the sun. So we named it, and we went to the University of Chicago because that's where he was retired from. His family could come in. And we just did it as a kind thing. And when I stood on stage, my phone was constantly buzzing. It was buzzing from Europe because we were live on BBC, and other things. And it became one of the biggest stories. So you could ask, why did people yell at me? So my boss at the time, the head of NASA, basically called me and it's like, why is everybody congratulating me? Like, what are you doing? And I basically said, look, like, by the way, you signed up on this. This looked like a small story. You signed up on it. Here's your signatures. But the story was 10 to 50 times bigger than we ever thought. And of course, it's a marquee mission that came from that amazing name on the mission, which is so important to both of us, because no, that has never happened, that there's a launch with a name up there. And Parker, that the person sitting right there with their family, it was just absolutely incredible and emotional, deeply emotional for me.
Yes, me too. It was awesome. What a great story. I didn't know all that.
Yeah. So Parker, not Zwicky. Yeah, there.
That's right. There we go. All right. So now I'm going to shift. We'll leave Parker out of it for a minute. James Webb or OSIRIS-REx?
James Webb is fundamentally changing how we think about the universe, the early universe, and raising so many questions. I love OSIRIS-REx for many other reasons. By the way, it's yet another one of those enormously surprising things. We went there to kind of touch a primitive body, as we called it, and it's a leftover of a water world. Like what? Like talking about being wrong. God, I love when science is wrong. It's like totally you planted one. That is so wrong. Like you did not, I mean, so many people predicted this kind of, there's no volatiles. Like there's lots of the building blocks that make us, the vast majority of them are there, and so, but, those very building blocks, we also see after the explosion of stars and these organic clouds, kind of that James Webb. So they belong together for me. It's like the star explodes, we see it on James Webb, and then we touch those kind of early kind of worlds that form from that dust, from these organic clouds that are left over by these stars. But it must be James Webb.
Yeah. Well, you raise a great point, because people don't think of it that way, but when the science is wrong is when we take the big leaps forward in our understanding.
Yes, exactly right. You always, like if you're an experimental scientist, you always prefer when the theories are wrong. It's a jumping off point for a great career. Like the worst that could happen to you is everybody is right. And for me, like this was one of those things where kind of with my good father and other discussions I've had, like I love things that are like in science I love that they're falsifiable. Any and all questions are valid. Put them out there. Like I don't believe in this kind of that no political correctness test. Put the question out. You can offend, like you can question everything I've ever done. That's what science is. And then let's throw the experiments at it. And if you're lucky, everything that you believed before is wrong. That is when things are getting really excited and books are written anew.
Yep, so true. All right, here's a tricky one. NASA or ESA?
Oh, NASA.
Wow.
I mean, I every night, every day, I still think of NASA. ESA is a wonderful organization of many countries that are doing important work in Europe. Just like NASA, they struggle also. Kind of what happens sometimes. Kasper, the big chess player, Kasparov,
yes,
he once said, and I asked him whether he actually said that, and he said yes. He basically said the biggest inhibitor of success tomorrow is success today. So kind of sometimes what happens, right? Kind of you're successful, you think you know it all, and kind of like you can. I mean, of course we want success, but we also want that kind of that feeling like no, we can do better. And both NASA and ESA have challenges there. NASA is where I spent the vast majority of my life and kind of my passion, and are there. Many of the missions, of course, that we just talked about are joined with ESA.
Well, Thomas, you're an important part of NASA's history. You had such an impact while you were there. It really was, I think, one of the most ambitious eras since the moon landing, the science that was done at NASA during your tenure.
Yeah, I was just so excited to be part of that and grateful to everybody who was involved. Absolutely, including the teams, of course, that we talked about.
Yeah. All right, so this one's a little partisan. I don't know if you remember, my daughter went to RPI, And so I've got to ask, who was really the first polytechnic? Was it Zurich or was it Rensselaer?
What's the right answer? I actually don't know the answer,
Well,
but
I'll argue it was RPI,
I
but
probably was.
I've been schooled, however, by people from your world that absolutely not.
So it's actually what's interesting about ETH, the university that I was in, remember a lot of the themes we're talking about is entrepreneurship here.
Yeah.
And so there's this guy, it's this guy Escher. So he came up with these ideas. It's like, I want to build a transportation system. Of course, the
Yeah.
transportation system in Switzerland, probably up with Japan as one of the best in the world. It's like, for that, I need a bank. So he came up with Credit Suisse, which was just acquired
Right.
by UBS. It's like, well, but I need technical people. So let's build ETH. And then, by the way, to insure the whole thing, we need not only insurers, we need reinsurance. So he started Swiss Re. So the guy, basically, driven by his ambition, came up with these kind of magnificent pillars that really have shaped industries.
Oh, yeah.
ETH is the leading university in continental Europe, right? Kind of in these technical domains, and even though I don't remember the dates exactly, has really educated some of the best. Of course, Einstein
Oh,
was
yes.
here as Pauli, a number of other Nobel Prize winners were here, and of course technical talent that you and I know about. And so for me, at the heart of it is this kind of the unreasonable entrepreneur, right? Kind of who just did
Yes.
something that nobody thought
Yeah.
was reasonable.
Created an entire ecosystem to get that one
Yeah,
thing done. So impressive.
yeah.
But well, I'll have to tell you that Rensselaer beat ETH by like 15 years.
So tell me about the Rensselaer story. Do you know it?
So it's the same kind of thing. There was an idea at that moment in time, historically, not just in America but in Europe, that a polytechnical education was the way to go. And in the U.S., it was really driven by a desire for engineering advancement. And because we were building infrastructure, right? It's a new world. And, my daughter went there, but also, my grandfather and great grandfather went there. And of course, my great grandfather was an immigrant from Prussia. And
Wow.
he wanted to be an engineer. And there wasn't, any other place to be than a polytechnic, revolutionary, entrepreneurial, if you will, idea at the time.
Yep. Amazing school. I mean, I know so many of my close friends are graduated from there as well as other universities as well. But it was a historic and amazing school right there.
Yeah, well, just like ETH, just
Yeah,
an
exactly.
amazing, amazing. And Polytechnic is the way to go.
Exactly right. Yeah. It has to
Well,
work, right? It has to work.
yes,
That's the point.
it has to work. Well, we're running down at the end of our time together, Thomas. It was so fun talking to you again.
Oh God, yes. It's I miss the times together, and I definitely want to come to one of your future launches again. Every time I'm at the launch, I always say it's the ultimate act of defiance, which is to kind of overcome the laws of gravity and do something that the first time you think about seems impossible, right? Kind of many.
Yeah,
There was a lot of people thought that it's not possible to launch. And through it, not only do we transcend deeper away from kind of enhance the circle in which our humanity lives and prospers, but also we support the planet itself. Just like people leaving the old world came to the US, the US
right.
came back and supported the old world when times of need. Space is, I think, where the support comes from, not just for the civil things we talked about, but increasingly for the military support. And I'm so glad we're together in this industry, and I'm so glad for just deeply appreciate what you're doing, what you did with me, for me as a friend and colleague. I can tell you the deep appreciation I have every time I show the Perseverance launch. I talk about our friendship because You know how hard it was. We were so deep into the
Oh yeah.
I still remember the welder from Alabama on the plane. That you got up there, kind of that picture was a long time
Yep.
was on my phone of kind of the one small problem that you found in a test and you fixed right there with the right person, because that was the last person of a team of 6,000 people who needed to do their work to go to Mars on time, and nobody pretty much else. China made it also. Nobody else
Right.
made it but us. And that I would just really say I blame a lot of our friendship on this, because I just really think I trusted you blindly, not because I'm stupid. It's because we had practiced that, right, in so many places. And so that's why we were successful. And I just want to tell you how I feel like with fondness of these times, and appreciate being with you on the show and seeing you're doing so well. And again, I want to come to see one of your future launches yet again.
Oh, absolutely. Thomas, I feel the same way. And you are invited to any launch. All you got to do is let us know. We'll get you in there.
I really appreciate it, Tory. Thank you so much.
You bet. All right. Well, thanks for being on the show. And for our listeners, like and subscribe. And Thomas, looking forward to seeing you next time.
Absolutely. Talk to you later, Tory.